Hello, I'm Alfie66 and let's take a look at every European nation and find their player with the most Premier League appearances, and we're only focusing on 1992 onwards. Right, let's go. Albania, Armando Broja, 76. Armando Broja has played in the Premier League for 4 clubs, those being Chelsea, Southampton, Fulham and Everton. He was a good player on his loan spell at Southampton, but he had a dreadfully anonymous loan spell at Fulham last season, and he's just finished another horrible loan spell at Everton this season. But he's still a decent player, and he's one of only 3 Albanians to ever play in the Premier League. Armenia, Henrik Mkhitaryan, 78. The only Armenian to ever set foot in the Premier League. He made 78 combined appearances for Man United and Arsenal, and was no good for either one. But he did score this absolute beauty against Sunderland in 2016. He won the Europa League with United in 2017 and could have won it again in 2019, but he missed out on one of the worst Arsenal capitulations of all time as they lost 4-1 to Chelsea in one half of football, and he's just been walloped 5-0 by PSG in the Champions League final. He wasn't great in the Prem. Austria, Paul Scharner, 221. I wasn't expecting this. I was expecting someone like Marko Arnautovic or Christian Fuchs, but no, it's Paul Scharner. He spent 7 years in the Premier League with Wigan and West Brom, which included getting haircuts that made him look like a patriotic Chelsea fan, and getting killed by Duncan Ferguson. Judging by this 1994 headbutt from Ferguson, I think Scharner should have just read the warning signs. Belarus, Alexander Hleb, 108. There's only ever been 2 Belarusians in the Premier League, and Alexander Hleb obviously beat Sergei Kornilenko, this sausage from Blackpool who couldn't keep Gary Taylor-Fletcher at the starting 11. Alexander Hleb was a quality footballer during his 3 years at Arsenal, and he soon got a move to Pep Guardiola's Barcelona, but he must have been about as much use as a plug socket in a fish tank if he was playing for Birmingham just 2 years later. Weirdly enough, he also played against Arsenal for Bate Borisov in the 2019 Europa League at the age of 37. For a nation that's only ever had 2 players in the Premier League, Hleb was great. Belgium, Kevin De Bruyne, 288. Within the final 8 games of this season, Kevin De Bruyne has become the Belgian player with the most Premier League appearances ever. 8 more than the player in second, which is actually Christian Benteke. Yeah, it's obviously not Wout Faes. One of the Premier League's best ever players, Man City's best ever player, and it's wonderful to see how he went from being a forgotten hobbit on the Chelsea bench in the 13-14 season to becoming Manchester City's record signing just 2 seasons later, and he's now one of the world's best ever players. City might never have anyone like him again. There were things De Bruyne did on the football pitch that no player could ever replicate. Bosnia and Herzegovina, Asmir Begovic, 256. It's now 2025 and Asmir Begovic has been in the Premier League since 2005, back when he was a young goalkeeper coming through at Portsmouth. He was a fantastic goalkeeper through his time at Stoke, was absolute dog piss for Chelsea in the 15-16 season where they infamously finished 10th. He only really started in the league for the Blues because of injuries and suspensions to Thibaut Courtois, and I bet you don't remember him for his 2 years at Bournemouth, where his Cherry's career ended because he couldn't dislodge a 39-year-old Artur Boruc from the team. Speaking of Artur Boruc, this might be the only reason you remember Begovic in a couple years' time, because in 2013 he became only the 5th goalkeeper ever to score a goal, scoring the longest goal in Premier League history from 101 yards, and one of the quickest goals in Premier League history after just 12 seconds of play. Yeah, he managed to lob Boruc from the other end of the pitch. Yeah, I can only imagine that when it came to sharing a dressing room with Begovic, Boruc was probably contemplating burning him alive. But yes, Begovic was overall a pretty good goalie. Bulgaria, Dimitar Berbatov, 229. A pretty prolific striker back in his day. His time in the Premier League included spells at Spurs, Man United and Fulham. He stood out most at Man United and is probably going to get a statue built in Sofia, and he's probably the tattoo of every patriotic Bulgarian football fan. Croatia, Mateo Kovacic, 203. Croatia have been pretty well represented in the Premier League in terms of appearances, with 7 out of their 30 players breaking the 100 appearance mark, and if Josko Gvardiol can keep up his form at Man City, he might just become the 8th Croatian player to reach 100 Premier League appearances, but as of now, his City teammate Mateo Kovacic is the Croatian with the most Premier League appearances. He's been in the Premier League since 2018, since he moved to Chelsea from Real Madrid, and he seems to have a tendency to get himself sent off against Arsenal. He was sent off for 2 yellow cards in the 2020 FA Cup final, and was extremely lucky to not get sent off at the Emirates last season. I'm still not over how he wasn't shown a second yellow card for this. Cyprus, Valentin Reberge, 10. Cyprus have only had 3 Premier League representatives, and all three have a combined total of 19 Premier League appearances. Valentin Roberge spent 3 years at Sunderland between 2013 and 2016 and only scored once for the Black Cats, that goal coming in the League Cup in 2013. It doesn't sound like he was very good. I mean, I can make a pretty good guess that he wasn't when he couldn't dislodge Santiago Virgini, a guy who did this. And as his name sounds, he was born in France. Czech Republic, Petr Cech, 443. Czech Republic have been very well represented in the Premier League in terms of appearances, with 10 out of their 29 players breaking the 100 appearance mark, and 2 breaking the 200 appearance mark. And by next season it could be 3. Tomáš Souček needs to play 6 more games and he will become the 3rd Czech with 200 Premier League appearances to their name. But as of now, Petr Cech and Patrik Berger are the only 2 Czechs to break the 200 appearance mark. And Petr Cech is also the only goalkeeper to break the 200 clean sheet mark, having broken David James's record of 169 clean sheets in December 2015. His debut season at Chelsea coincided with the Blues conceding just 15 goals all year, a record that still hasn't been broken. He played 35 out of the 38 games that season and got his own trademark when Stephen Hunt busted his head in 2006. He was definitely a legend at Chelsea, but he was quite poor at Arsenal, let's be honest. Denmark, Thomas Sorensen, 364. I was definitely expecting Peter Schmeichel to top this list, but no, Thomas Sorensen beats Peter Schmeichel and Christian Eriksen by 54 appearances, having played in the Premier League for 17 years, from 1998 at Sunderland to 2015 at Stoke. Unfortunately for Sorensen, some spectacular goals have been scored against him, including this one from Minor Figueroa. He was still a pretty good goalkeeper. He played for Sunderland, Aston Villa and Stoke across his 17-year Premier League career, and he's one of 4 Danish Sorensens to play in the Premier League, the others being Jacob, Lasse and Mads, 3 players who have a combined total of 26 Premier League appearances, 14 times less than this Sorensen. England, Gareth Barry, 653, the player with the most Premier League appearances to his name, having spent virtually his entire career in the Premier League. 2 out of his 22 professional seasons were spent away from the Premier League, those being the 18-19 and 19-20 seasons while he played for West Brom in the Championship. He made over half of his Premier League appearances with Aston Villa over 12 years with them, then followed 4 years at Man City, 5 at Everton and 3 at West Brom, although only 1 was spent in the Premier League, totaling 653 appearances in the top flight. He is by no means a Premier League legend, but in terms of longevity, he's a king. However, by next season, this video could be wrong, as James Milner is on 637 appearances. He needs to play just 16 more times to break Gareth Barry's record and become the player with the most Premier League appearances to their name. But as of now, Gareth Barry wins. Estonia, Mark Poom, 138. 2 Estonians have played in the Premier League, those being defender Ragnar Klavan, who spent 2 years at Liverpool, and goalkeeper Mark Poom, who actually had a decent longevity as a Premier League player, spending 9 years in the Premier League. He spent 6 of those at Derby in the 90s, 1 at Sunderland and 2 at Arsenal, where he was about as memorable as what your dad had for lunch on the 22nd of April 2009. Poom was an okay goalkeeper, but he constantly went from being dropped to being the starter again, in between relegations with Sunderland and Derby, but he obviously didn't get relegated with Arsenal. Faroe Islands, Gunnar Nilsson, 1. The only Faroese player to ever play in the Premier League, and he only ever made 1 appearance. Nilsson obviously had some sort of quality, if he was even allowed to dream of stepping foot onto a Premier League pitch, and he was allowed to do exactly that. In Manchester City's 0-0 draw with Arsenal in April 2010, Nilsson came on for Shay Given as a substitute and became the first and as of now last Faroese player to ever play in the Premier League. Respect? Finland, Jussi Jääskeläinen, 436. There's been some players worth bags of diarrhea from Finland in the Premier League over the years, but Jussi Jääskeläinen was a very good goalkeeper. He spent 14 straight years in the Premier League between 2001 and 2015. He spent 12 years at Bolton, where he became memorable for making this save from Andy Cole, and he finished off his Premier League career with 3 years at West Ham between 2012 and 2015. He was a very respectable goalkeeper. France, Sylvain Distin, 469. Yes, France shocked me as well. Sylvain Distin wins the French ranking by 105. France was a real shocker all around. Thierry Henry, Olivier Giroud and Bakary Sagna don't even make the top 10. but Moussa Sissoko somehow does. A guy that turned into the Jordan logo 2 minutes into a Champions League final. And the winner is still Van Distan. He spent 15 years of his career in England between 2001 and 2016. He was most known for his spells at Man City and Everton. He's also had spells at Newcastle, Portsmouth, and the one that everyone forgets, Bournemouth. He was a very good player. Georgia, Georgie King Kladze, 102. There's only 5 Georgians that have played in the Premier League, and Georgie King Kladze wins this ranking. He only played 4 seasons in the Premier League. He got relegated with Man City, but he was quality there. And he spent 3 years at Derby. He was a good player. Germany, Robert Huth, 322. Germany was another shocker. I had to learn that Pascal Gross has more Premier League appearances than Jens Lehmann. But the winner is Robert Huth. For a German player, Robert Huth actually spent his entire professional career in England. After coming through the Chelsea Academy, he moved to Middlesbrough in 2006, then to Stoke in 2009, and most famously to Leicester in 2014, where he famously won the Premier League in 2016, establishing himself as a class Premier League centre-back, scoring twice in a title-defining 3-1 win over Man City. He was a very underrated player. Gibraltar, Danny Higginbottom, 210. The only player from Gibraltar to play in the Premier League. Higginbottom was a centre-back who played for Man United, Derby, Southampton, Sunderland and Stoke, and picked up 3 caps for Gibraltar. So what if he was a centre-back? He was probably good enough to play up front for the national team. I'm guessing Higginbottom had to host daily lectures for his national teammates on the offside rule. I'm being mean, I know I'm being mean, but seriously, Gibraltar's standard of football is awful. And as I expected, Higginbottom was not born in Gibraltar. He was born in Manchester. Greece, Nikos Dabizas, 148. Greece was quite a tight ranking. Nikos Dabizas has just 9 more Premier League appearances than the player in second, Stelios Giannakopoulos. Dabizas spent 7 years in the Premier League, playing 5 with Newcastle and 2 with Leicester, and he was part of the famous Euro 2004 winning squad. It sounds like he was quite mid. Hungary, Zoltan Gira, 172. Like Finland, Hungary have unloaded some absolute whale poo in the Premier League. But this season, the likes of Dominik Szoboszlai and Milos Kerkez are making me forget about the likes of Gabor Kiraly, Adam Bogdan and Tamas Priskin. Zoltan Gira is the Hungarian with the most Premier League appearances by a country mile. He spent 10 years in the Premier League, he had 2 spells at West Brom in between 3 years at Fulham, was influential in the midfield for the Baggies in the 04-05 season, where they miraculously survived relegation on the last day despite being last at Christmas. He scored 46 goals from defensive or central midfield. He was quite a good player. Iceland, Herman Hreidarsson, 322. Iceland have been quite well represented in the Premier League, as they were in the seasons that I describe as the prime, purely because it was the group of years that I really started getting into watching the Premier League and playing all the FIFAs. Those being the 2013-14 season through to the 2018-19 season. After that, it just felt routine to watch Premier League football, mainly because we were trapped inside soon after. Now I just try to watch as many league games as I can, or at least watch Match of the Day in the morning. In the seasons I describe as the prime, Iceland always had at least 3 players in the Premier League. Me remembering that they play in the Prem through these sticker books I used to collect. I remember this, we looked for this sticker, Ari Skulason, for ages. 1 away from completing Iceland. But now there's only 1 Icelandic player in the Premier League. Brentford's second string goalkeeper Hakon Valdimarsson. Yeah, as an Arsenal fan, it's probably best I don't talk about Icelandic goalkeepers for any longer. But let's talk about Icelandic centre-backs. And there we find Herman Hreidarsson, someone who's played Premier League football for 5 different clubs and been relegated with all 5 of them. He was relegated with Crystal Palace in 1998, Wimbledon in 2000, Ipswich in 2002, Charlton in 2007 and Portsmouth in 2010. But his best football was surely at Charlton. He helped the Addicts to their highest ever Premier League finish of 7th in the 03-04 season. Annoyingly for the Addicts, they could have got top 4 in Champions League football, but they capitulated at the end of the season and finished 7th. And there was no Conference League back then, so there was no reward for them. Sounds like he was a decent Prem player. And I know that it's crazy to say that about a man that's got more relegations than Aaron Ramsdale. Republic of Ireland, Shay Given, 451. The Irish guy, this one's for you. Shay Given beat 2nd place John O'Shea by just 6 appearances in this ranking. But can you blame him? He's a goalie. They all have immense longevity. Shay, whose real name is Seamus, spent 21 of his 23 professional seasons in the Premier League. He spent 12 years at Newcastle, but it seems mysterious how he was accepted at St James's Park when he was playing for Sunderland in the 95-96 season. He was a great keeper for Newcastle, and once played every game of the season for 4 years out of 5 between 2001 and 2006. He moved to Man City in 2008, but quickly lost his place to Joe Hart. He left for Aston Villa the season City would iconically win the league in the last minute. He played 33 league games in the 11-12 season, but then went on to play 4 league games over the next 3 years. He was allowed to play in the 14-15 FA Cup final and got laughed at by me as Arsenal won 4-0 and Alexis Sanchez scored this belter. And a lot of people forget that he also played 2 seasons at Stoke, where he retired at the appropriate age for a goalkeeper, 42. Israel Yossi Benayoun, 194, a midfielder who played for West Ham, Chelsea, Liverpool, had loan spells at Arsenal and a second one at West Ham. Yes, Israel are included in here because they're part of UEFA, despite being firmly in Asia. Italy, Gianfranco Zola, 229. One of the most bitter pills to swallow as a Premier League fan is the fact that far less Italian players have played in the Premier League than we all think. You can prove that right when you consider that only one Italian player has ever won the thing, and it isn't Gianfranco Zola, someone who was utter class at Chelsea. He spent 7 years at the club, scored 80 goals in 312 games. He left the year that Roman Abramovich took over the club. Kosovo, Florent Hadagionar, 47. Forgive me if I mispronounce that name. Kosovo have only ever had 4 Premier League representatives, and Florent Hadagionar played in Huddersfield's only 2 Premier League seasons. He played decently well in the 17-18 season, but in the 18-19 season he was right back of a defence that were getting ripped to shreds every week. Latvia, Marians Pahars, 129. There's only ever been 5 Latvians in the Premier League, and Marians Pahars was the only one who broke the 20 appearance mark, let alone the 100 appearance mark. He spent 7.5 years at Southampton. He scored 42 league goals for Southampton before being flicked away to Cyprus. Might be the best Latvian player of all time. Lithuania, Tomas Danilevicius, 2. Lithuania have a combined total of 3 Premier League appearances. 2 from forward Tomas Danilevicius, who played twice for Arsenal in the 2001 season, and the last one from former Watford goalkeeper Giedrius Arlauskis, who played once as a substitute back in 2015, sporting a name on his shirt that made him look like that company from Sweden that delivers me milk and cheese. And Tomas Danilevicius was another forgotten potato on the Arsenal bench. He picked up 71 caps for the national team and was previously president of the Lithuanian Football Federation. Yeah, he crawled onto a Premier League pitch twice, and now Lithuania worships him. Can't blame them, he played for the best club in the world. Malta, Dylan Kerr, 5. The only Maltese player to play in the Premier League. Considering you could probably get away with calling him a Malteser, then I'm glad he hasn't become addicted to eating chocolate on the sofa every day. He played 5 league games for Leeds in the 92-93 season, and unless Jamie Carragher's son James somehow crawls his way onto a Premier League pitch, or some other player from Malta magically appears in England, Kerr will always be the only Malteser to play in the Premier League, as he has been for the whole of Premier League time. Montenegro, Stevan Jovetic, 30. 4 Montenegrins have played in the Premier League. I bet you forgot that both Savic and Jovetic played for Man City. Savic lasted 1 season at the Etihad before moving to Fiorentina in 2012, where he played alongside Jovetic for 1 season before he then moved to Man City in 2013. He lasted 2 years at the Etihad and scored 8 league goals in 30 games. He was a much better striker elsewhere. Netherlands, George Boateng, 384. Another shocker. I was expecting Edwin van der Sar or Virgil van Dijk to top this list. Born in Ghana, he was raised in the Netherlands. He spent 13 years in the Premier League, playing for Coventry, Aston Villa, Middlesbrough and Hull, and scored 17 goals over 384 games from defensive midfield. Sounds like he was alright. North Macedonia, Ezgan Alioski, 36. There's only been 5 Macedonians in the Premier League, and Ezgan Alioski only played 1 season of Premier League football and still outweighs all the rest. He was excellent for Leeds in the 2021 season as they finished 9th, and he then left for Al Ahly in Saudi Arabia 2 years before it started becoming popular to move to Saudi. Yeah, he went to the football retirement home early. Northern Ireland, Aaron Hughes, 455. He spent 17 years in the Premier League, 8 with Newcastle, 2 with Aston Villa, and the final 7 with Fulham. He was quite an average footballer to be honest, but still, you can't argue with 455 Prem appearances. Norway, John Arne Riise, 321. John Arne Riise was memorable for having an absolute thunderbolt of a strike on him. So powerful that he managed to kill Alan Smith's leg with it and kept him out for 7 months. Rees spent 7 years at Liverpool and 3 with Fulham and fired in crackers from everywhere. Norway's list was again quite a shocker. We all know Erling Haaland's going to beat Rees in the future, and the fact that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was beaten by this average peanut Braid Hangeland got me. Poland, Lukas Fabianski, 376. Lukas Fabianski absolutely annihilates this ranking. He's first with 192 more than second placed Jan Bednarek, and he's been in the Premier League since 2007 when he signed for Arsenal from Legia Warsaw, but he was constantly forced onto the bench at Arsenal by fellow Pole Wojciech Szczesny and, God help me, Manuel Almunia. He found form at Swansea and is now playing the best he ever has at West Ham. And I love Fabianski just because he's Polish and used to play for Arsenal, and he's one of quite a few long-lasting Polish goalkeepers to play in the Premier League, along with the likes of Wojciech Szczesny, Artur Boruc, Jerzy Dudek and Thomas Kuszczak. Portugal, Luis Boa-Morte, 296. Yes, this average midfielder from Lisbon has more Prem appearances than a man with 5 Ballon d'Ors. Luis Boa-Morte's Premier League action came with Arsenal, Southampton, Fulham and West Ham between 1997 and 2011. He was good while at Fulham, but as an attacker midfielder, he could barely cough in the direction of a goal for every other club. Romania, Dan Petrescu, 215. Again, Dan Petrescu absolutely wrecks this ranking. 161 appearances more than second place Costel Pantilimon. Some of the Romanians we've seen in the Premier League have been absolute pig shy. Let's forget about the likes of Florin Andone and Vlad Kirikesh. But Dan Petrescu was a decent right back in the 90s and early 2000s. After making a big impact at Sheffield Wednesday in the 94-95 season, he moved to Chelsea ahead of the 95-96 season and played prominently there over the next 5 years. He also had brief spells with Bradford and Southampton and would then retire in Bucharest. Russia, Andrei Kanchelskis, 151. For a country as big as Russia have only ever had 8 Premier League players. The same way I was surprised that a country as small as Iceland have qualified for 1 World Cup, which is more qualifications than India. It's weird. Andrei Kanchelskis played for Man United, Everton and Southampton and had a brief loan spell at Man City. He was definitely better in his spells at Old Trafford and Goodison Park, chipping in with double-figure goals twice and winning 2 Premier Leagues, though in 7 years it wasn't a great tally for a forward. Scotland, Darren Fletcher, 341. Scotland was a very, very tight ranking. 7 players with over 300 appearances. Darren Fletcher was a Premier League player for 16 years, spending 13 of them with Man United, winning 5 Premier Leagues, moved to West Brom in 2015 and spent 2.5 years with them, and finished off his Premier League career with a year at Stoke. Serbia, Branislav Ivanovic, 274. Serbia have been very well represented in the Premier League, with the likes of Nemanja Vidic, Nemanja Matic and Alexander Kolarov, but none of them have as many Premier League appearances as Branislav Ivanovic. He spent 9.5 years at Chelsea, playing under 14 different managers, including interim managers, and winning 3 Premier Leagues, but he only really won 2, having left Chelsea midway through the 2016-17 season, a season in which Chelsea would go on to win the league. And he also got bitten by the vampire Luis Suarez, where he was probably greeted online to a message from Otman Bakal saying,
"First time?"
Slovakia, Martin Skrtel, 242. Yes, this guy is not a Pokemon. No surprises here for Slovakia. Apart from Skrtel, Martin Dubravka and Szilard Nemeth, most of the Slovakians to play in the Premier League have either been bench-warming weasels or one-season wonders for terrible clubs. Martin Skrtel spent 9 years at Liverpool, was disrespectfully laughed out of the club at the end of Klopp's first season, and absolutely loved the goal against Man City, as any Liverpool player should. He was in his best form in the 13-14 season, scoring 7 goals from centre-back, but couldn't stop them from infamously botting the league off to Gerrard Slip. Slovenia, Robert Koren, 57. There's only ever been 6 Slovenians in the Premier League, and Robert Koren played over 100 games for both West Brom and Hull. Unfortunately, nearly all of them were in the Championship. He played 35 games for West Brom in the 08-09 season, where West Brom were relegated after just 1 year, and he played his final 22 league games in the 13-14 season for Hull. Only ever scored 3 goals. He doesn't sound like he was very good. Spain, David De Gea, 415. One of the Premier League's best and the world's best goalkeepers of all time. 415 league appearances over 12 years with Man United. Towards the later years of his Man United career, you couldn't make your mind up on whether he really was the best goalie in the world, or a useless toad with wrists made of chocolate. I think De Gea should have played 1 more season at Man United, because they replaced him with this tart from Inter. If you thought that David De Gea had the reflexes of a crippled slug, then that form would have made Andre Onana look like the the second coming of Peter Schmeichel, but despite the fact he left one season too early, he's still the best goalkeeper in Man United's history. Sweden, Sebastian Larsson, 282. He played 3 games for Arsenal in the 05-06 season, going on to spend 3 Premier League years at Birmingham, scoring 14 Prem goals from midfield for Birmingham, winning the EFL Cup in 2011, and he left for Sunderland following Birmingham's relegation in 2011, spent 6 years with the Black Cats, and somehow scored less goals than he did at Birmingham. He was alright. Switzerland, Stefan Henshaws, 243. Again, correct me if I've mispronounced it. Switzerland have been very well represented in the Premier League. If Fabian Schär lasts 2 more seasons, he could break this record, but right now it's held by former Blackburn, Wigan and Liverpool defender Stefan Henshaws. He was only really a good defender through his first spell at Blackburn and his first few years at Liverpool. He fell out of favour in the 02-03 season, was flung off to Wigan for a year in 2005, and a year later was playing back at Ewood Park. Turkey, Muzzy Izzet, 248. This guy really does sound like a gangster rapper from South London. But no, he's a Turkish midfielder who spent 12 years in the Premier League, 3 were spent hiding in Chelsea's reserves, but he flourished at Leicester, spending 8 years with the Foxes, 7 were spent in the Premier League, and he famously won the Goal of the Season award in 98-99 by scoring this belter against Tottenham. And he spent 2 years at Birmingham before the end of his career. Ukraine, Alexander Zinchenko, 145. Ukraine have only ever had 11 players in the Premier League, and 5 are in the league now. They've been well represented. Just ignore Andrei Voronin, Mikhailo Mudryk and Andrei Shevchenko. Andrei Shevchenko, the Ballon d'Or winner, was an absolute flop at Chelsea. And Alexander Zinchenko is likely on his way out of Arsenal this summer with 145 Premier League appearances to his name. He spent 5 years at Man City, mainly as a second choice left back. Moved to Arsenal in 2022. He started very well under Arteta, but due to injuries and all the other left backs Arsenal have brought in, he's fallen out of the team due to the form of Miles Lewis-Skelly this season. And let's be honest, his Arsenal career has been riddled with injury, just like every other Arsenal defender in history. Though if Zinchenko leaves this summer, Vitaly Mykolenko has a more than high chance of becoming the Ukrainian with the most Premier League appearances. He has to play at least 35 games next season to break it. Wales' Ryan Giggs, 632. Doesn't warrant much explanation now, does it? 24 years at Man United, 22 spent in the Premier League, 3rd highest appearance count in Premier League history. Legend. So that's the end of the video. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, remember to like, subscribe and put the notifications on so you don't miss a thing, and I'll see you in the next one.